What's up, bro? How you? All right. It's coming from the speaker.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, is it feeding straight in the string yard?
Yeah, it's not.
No, it's not.
Okay. Usually they figure out a line. Your device is camera.
Say it one more time.
Where's the device? Camera that's picking.
Yeah.
Okay. You run your audio.
I think if I had another like device, I could.
Yeah. You should have, for Thursday night, you want to think about, because it's native sound.
Yeah, it don't get picked up. Are they hearing? They're not hearing anything.
What time is it?
6:45.
Get ready to just wrap up, say some words. We're just gonna have to. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in to the first DEIS launch and open house event. We have some amazing speakers lined up for you all today. And today is an opportunity for more than anything to let you know about our new, unique 6-month DEIS Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Solutions Certificate Program powered by UNC Chapel Hill, Stanford, and Duke. And we have some amazing speakers here with us today to give some open remarks. For all who don't know, tuning in, I'm Kyron Blanks, co-founder and Chief Growth Officer at Opportunity Hub, and I'm here to make sure that you all leave this conversation informed and ready to make your organization's DEIS ready.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks everybody who's here today, and thanks for those of you that are joining us virtually. I'm Greg Brown. I'm the Executive Director of the Keene Institute of Private Enterprise. So I work with the Entrepreneurship Center at UNC, who's helping with the planning and logistics for this program. And I just want to talk a little bit about how we got to know Rodney in particular and the importance of this for the work that we do. We first were introduced to Rodney a couple of years ago when he came and spoke at our Frontiers of Entrepreneurship conference down at the Breakers, and we were just blown away with the work that OHUB is doing, that he's doing, and really wanted to figure out how we can partner with the organization to facilitate that work, make it accessible to a larger group of people, and especially have an impact here in North Carolina where we do a lot of our work. That turned into ongoing discussions with Rodney, and eventually Rodney was kind enough to join us as a distinguished visiting professor. There's a joint professorship program between Duke and UNC that was founded by Julian Robertson. It's an endowed distinguished professorship that lets us bring in esteemed academics and practitioners and policy people that really bring in sort of a fresh new perspective and work on specific projects with students and with faculty and with the community. And from that, we decided to work together on the DEIS project, and just really excited to have Rodney as a professor and also to be able to partner on this. So with that, let me turn it over to Jason.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Raleigh Founded, formerly HQ Raleigh. Really happy to have you guys here. It's over the past couple of years, we've been working on a number of DEI initiatives, and I think the pandemic has really helped us to focus on some areas that maybe we hadn't been as focused on in the past. We've been around for about almost 10 years now. We've got 417 member companies and about 1,700 members that work throughout our space, at least pre-COVID. Has been coming back to life a little bit. We're very much a mission-driven organization. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm a social entrepreneur. And we've really grown and developed over the years. We started out supporting high-impact, high-growth companies, and over time, we've definitely been supporting a range of companies. And this past year, this past couple of years, we've been focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've just raised close to $700,000 for a food and beverage accelerator geared towards women and persons of color, which we're really excited about. We've been doing some consultative work with some developers that are focused on diversity, equity, inclusion in Greenville, South Carolina. And so, we're really excited about the consultative work that we're doing specifically in underserved communities. And we really appreciate the work that you're doing. And welcome here. And we hope to see you here again, and I hope to come your way in the not too distant future.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks to Raleigh Founded for being our gracious venue partner for this event too. Hi everyone, my name is Jill Willett. I'm the Assistant Director at the Entrepreneurship Center at UNC. Couldn't be more excited to be here with everyone today. And I just want to say that first, congratulations for carving out time to tune in tonight. I know all of us are busy, we have families, and so this really speaks to your commitment that you would dial in and kind of be here with us tonight. Chances are, if you have gotten anything from UNC about DEIS or any of our kind of other programs, you've probably heard from me. But again, just welcome to this event. We're really excited to be here with you. And I think next we've got a couple folks that are coming in from, dialing in from different locations. So let's hear a few words from them.
Jill, I'm guessing that means me, since I now see myself. Thank you very much for that kind introduction. My name is John Fjeld. I am the director of the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Initiative at Duke University, and also a professor of strategy at the Fuqua School of Business. And thank you so much for having me here. And I hope, this is a totally bizarre experience. I have no idea whether there's 14,000 or 3 people involved. But however many there are of you, you're here because you already believe in the importance of the diversity, equity, and inclusion work for all of us. Why I'm so glad that we at Duke are partnering with OHUB, Rodney, and UNC Chapel Hill, and also Stanford, is that these are 2 programs that you'll hear about that are focused on how. Not just is it important, but how do we actually make the change, affect the change that we all want so desperately. And I will say there's no one I've learned more about this subject from over the last few years than Rodney Sampson. The program he has created, both the DEIS and the Investor Program, are truly outstanding. And we are very delighted to play our role in partnership with our friends at UNC Chapel Hill and also Stanford. And I hope all of you participating will agree that this is a truly compelling program and a terrific opportunity to learn how we can actually be agents for change in this important work. So thank you all. Thank you, Greg, Jill, Jason, for hosting, and to everyone at OHUB. And we are delighted to be partners with you in this.
John, we can thank you more for those very kind words. Hey, Giselle, thank you so much for joining us. So with that said, I want to thank you all for these warm and welcome remarks and just for your support and for allowing us to anchor the work of Opportunity Hub here in the Raleigh-Durham region. Really appreciate you. And so we want to make sure we don't want to leave our guests waiting too long. So without further ado, we're going to get some of our panelists on the stage. So thank you all so much for joining us for opening remarks. Without further ado, we're going to bring on OHUB CEO and founder Rodney Sampson, Vicky Gibbs from UNC, and also former vice chairman of NASDAQ, Mr. David Wilberforce. I'm going to let you all take the panel. Stage is yours.
Where do you want me? Oh.
Hello, everyone. Wonderful to see you. My name is Vicky Gibbs. I'm the former executive director at the Entrepreneurship Center at Keenan Flagler, and am a continued partner on all of these initiatives with OHUB and the team here. This is really important work. I'm excited that y'all have all tuned in to hear more about it and hear how impactful it can be and hear how you can go from talking about things into action. So I'm going to moderate this conversation today. I'm really excited to share the stage with Rodney and David. And to kick it off, I would love for the 2 of them to give you an introduction into who they are and why this work is really important to them. So I'm going to pass it on to you first, David, and then we're going to have Rodney give us a little intro and tell us a little bit more about the course.
Thanks, Vicki. David Wheel, former vice chairman at NASDAQ. I've been dubbed father of the Jobs Act, which, for those of you that don't know, gave birth to crowdfunding, general solicitation of private placements, and all sorts of forms of different capital, ways to raise capital. And we run a decentralized, inclusive investment bank, which is now, we just got named to the Inc. 5000 today, as a matter of fact. And we're in 20 states. We're supporting investment bankers in 20 states, the District of Columbia, and 4 foreign countries. And Rodney Sampson, I've been a friend and admirer of his for a long time, going back, and our paths crossed in the Obama White House, and just spoke at this Kingonomics conference at the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King's March on Washington, and a host of other areas. And so he's really the light.
Thank you, David. Well, good evening, everyone. How's it going? Great. All right, there we go. Come on. This is a lunch party. We got a DJ, we got some vibes, we got some food. So let's definitely make sure that we put it to good use. I know I plan to after we get this business out of the way. So once again, I'm Rodney Sampson. I serve as Executive Chairman and CEO of Opportunity Hub. I'm also a General Partner at the 100 Black Angels and Allies Fund. What I'm really excited about is the distinguished professorship I have with UNC Chapel Hill and Duke. I'm really honored for that. I do not count it lightly. I believe I worked very hard in a pandemic. We all did. And I thought we got more done in the last 15 months or so. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity. Greg, I want to say thank you for that. Vicki as well, and the entire team, Jill, Sean, Scott. And just to think, we met at the Bleakers,
Year and a half ago.
And here we are. And so I know we have also Tashayla Person that's also joining us as well. Hey, Tashayla, how are you?
Good, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, thank you as well. And Tashayla is with the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City. Do you want to take a minute to introduce yourself to our in-person and hybrid audience? And by the way, hi to everyone that's on y'all wave virtually, the folks at LinkedIn and Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We might even be on TikTok. So welcome. You know how we do it OHUB style. So Tashayla, would you take a second and just introduce yourself to our in-person and hybrid audience? Thank you.
Absolutely. So Tashayla Person, I'm the Director of Public Policy with the Civic Council of Greater Kansas City. We're a nonprofit organization composed of the leadership of the largest employers in the Kansas City region, so both the Kansas side and the Missouri side. And our vision is kind of to help achieve regional prosperity for all. So obviously diversity, equity, inclusion plays a big part in that. So we're working with Rodney on quite a few things. And so I'm just happy to be here to talk about those and highlight some of that work.
Excellent. Very good. I'll provide some starting context and then I'll pass it back over to you. Look, we're all alive. I think that's the first thing we should be grateful. Like that's something everyone can agree on. Is, hey, we're alive. We may not agree on anything else, but if we can start with that. And so I like to start, at that place. Last year was a rough year. In the middle of all of us fighting this, kind of invisible enemy called COVID, we saw, I guess thanks to technology and, the fearless work of the young lady who recorded the murder of George Floyd. I still haven't been able to watch it. I just don't like to watch that type of stuff. But on your timeline, things come across, and I think, historically, these type of reckonings seem to come together like every 50 years or so. Like if you kind of study American history, just antiquity in general. And so it was about time for another one of these, national conversations around what I consider to be the Achilles heel of America, which is our state when it comes to racism, discrimination, and bias in this country. And I think we've come an incredibly long way. But what excites me some days, but some days I feel so tired, to be honest, is that we have so far to go. And so last year, in the middle of a pandemic, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, we were able to create something unique and new. David and I have been talking back and forth over this for years. OHUB has been consulting and advising different organizations for years. And I felt like, and I have these conversations with my wife, who's a co-founder of Opportunity Hub with me, is that I felt like my work was performative. That the companies that were supporting what we were doing it to be performative and not to be sacrificial. And so last year, I was like very tired. I was like, I want to stop. Maybe I just go build another product company, maybe focus on the fund. I love investing. I love talking to founders. But something wouldn't let me go. And this program was a part of giving some organization to a new and fresh approach. And where I don't want to go too deep into like what we'll talk about in the course and certificate this fall. And I want to say something about doing this here at UNC. I was getting a ton of calls, you know, when the Nicole Jones thing came about, and I'm like, "You're at UNC, right?" It was like, "Yeah." "How do you know?" "I looked at your LinkedIn. You're at UNC." And they were like, "Why are you there?" I was like, "Because I believe I love ground zero. You know, I love to be at the root of an opportunity, not a problem, but the root of an opportunity." And the fact that we have this collaborative, choosing my words carefully, between UNC, Duke, and Stanford, I'm excited. And with that, I turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Rodney. I always love hearing you speak because I always get a new nugget every time, so thanks. One of the things that Rodney's taught me is that he really provides inspiration to move us from talking about something to doing something. You are truly one of the hardest working people that I know, and you're doing it for the right reasons, and you're doing it for the greater good. So I really appreciate that. So here to kick off this conversation, I would love for each of y'all just to talk a little bit about how you moved to that action and how you've seen this come alive in just the past 12 months and sort of what that could provide as inspiration to others. So, Tashala, do you want to start off?
Sure, happy to. So, thank you. So, like I said in my introduction, we've been working with Rodney on a few things, and I would probably say that's kind of the catalyst to move us from our conversation to actually doing. And when we brought him in, we kind of had some concepts and said, here's what we want to do. How do we make it happen? So one of those initiatives is a board thing project to help place Black and Brown talent on corporate boards and in executive leadership positions. So OHUB and Rodney are actually the program managers for that program, and we announced last month. And so what we announced was a DEIS pledge and an executive leadership hiring initiative. And so we're asking CEOs to do 3 things to kind of buy in. The first ask is CEOs to take the DEIS pledge. The second one is to get certified through a DEIS certification course offered by UNC. And then the last is to have CEOs partner with OHUB to appoint and then hire these people from these talent pools. So that was something that, obviously when you're talking about diversity and inclusion, you're like, how do we get these people into more networks? How do we get them into positions of power? How do we get them on boards? So that was a big conversation that we had. And so we kind of tried to put a plan to it. And this is kind of what that plan has brought. So we just announced last month, and now we're kind of looking for the recruiting and that pool of talent. And then the next we'll be looking to place them. So it's a great endeavor. So thank you, Rodney. And I'm here representing another coworker of ours, Sherry Gonzalez, who has been really instrumental in getting that off the ground as well with Rodney.
We're sociological entrepreneurs is what we really are and what we're trying to do. I get on the call every Monday morning with Rodney and Kyron and Opportunity Hub, and we're trying to innovate solutions. We're trying to innovate solutions to a problem, and you have to define it, you have to measure it, and then you have to develop strategies essentially against those metrics to see how you're charting progress. And what I love about these people is that and Rodney in particular, I've been running into Rodney, in the White House and other places for going on, probably 15 years at least now, Rodney. And it's, he's a walk the talk, dedicate your life to moving the needle. And I want to just take a second, and I'm going to define it. And of course, I could be subject to a lot of criticism, but I have a term that I call the litmus test. And for me, you know, and maybe just to kind of give you a sense of what drives me a little bit is I have a handicapped brother, and you understand, but for the grace of God go I, that, you know, how fortunate you are. And I also am a patriot, and I put on my red, white, and blue epaulets when I go and I testify in Congress. I want to see this country be the best country that it can be. I understand that diversity is our secret sauce, that we do a better job of incorporating different kinds of people probably than any other country on the face of the globe. But I also understand that there's a country on the other side of the globe that is not competing the way, according to our kind of ethics, if you will, stealing our technology and has 1 billion more people. And last I looked, none of us, whether you're black or white, are going to integrate well in that society, but they can integrate into ours. And so there is a bit of an existential threat. And I believe that the human capital that we have, which is all of us, needs to perform at the highest level possible. And so if you go through historically and you look at who's lagged for reasons we all understand, you know, you look at the African American community in particular, and by that I want to carve out African Americans, not necessarily people coming from Africa or the islands and whatnot, but our African American people, and they've borne the brunt of poverty and discrimination. Also American Indians. To me, that's the litmus test of how we do as a society, that if we can do a better job of integrating African Americans and American Indians at all levels, other populations actually statistically have assimilated at roughly the same rate if you look at Pew Institute studies. So for me, it's a great challenge. It's a great entrepreneurial challenge. It takes all of us coming together. But at some point, you want to have folks sit at the same table from the entry stage positions in corporations all the way up to the boardroom, senior management, and see, you know, proper, full economic representation, because only then are we going to sort of realize our full potential as a nation. I think it's absolutely critical to the long-term well-being of my children, your children, everyone's children, to kind of leave this country in a better place than it was. And I'm a little bit older than Rodney, but I can remember all the way back to the water cannon, attacks on African Americans that were demonstrating during the civil rights movement. I saw that stuff on the old black and white TVs. That's how old I am. And we've come a long way, but Lord knows we've come that way because people have been demonstrating and fighting and doing what was really righteous. We have a lot more work to do because it doesn't happen organically, it doesn't happen by itself. I have a lot more work to do. You know, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to is the definitions that we come up and figuring out how to implement them. But I think it behooves all of us to try and be, for the well-being of this country, to come together as a collective and to figure out what's best for the overall common good, because we're not competing against ourselves, Republicans and Democrats. We have an existential threat on the other side of the globe, and we need to get our act together. And this is part of that process.
Thanks, everyone. So one of the points that I think all of y'all have made is that this is a problem that takes a long time to fix, and it's a multifaceted problem that takes multiple people coming together to fix it, but with a common goal. So I know that all of y'all have done work looking at this broadly in systems. You know, Rodney, you did some work with the Federal Reserve Board around some research around how to think about equity districts. Y'all have implemented things in Kansas City, things like that. And I want you to speak a little bit about that work and how it relates to DEIS and how it all kind of comes together. But also, I want everyone to realize who's listened that there's data that proves that diversity is better. Diversity makes sense. Diversity produces better results. There's a trends report that the eShip Center and the Keenan Institute, run by Greg Brown, we produce every year that has sections in there around disparities in funding but also the fact that businesses that do have diversity at the top levels and diversity throughout their organizations perform better. So if we do want to succeed, diversity is the right answer. And it takes a whole bunch of things to make sure that happens throughout the country and the organization. So Rodney, do you want to talk a little bit about some of that work you've done with the Federal Reserve Board and what you're doing in KC, and then to Shayla, if you could talk about that too.
Sure. I'm glad you brought that up. You know, I kind of paralleled it a little bit to the startup ecosystem. And what's interesting about building startups, like this amazing space that we're in right now, the majority of the companies, when I look around, are not household names today. But if you go back, 30, 40 years ago, you go to Palo Alto or you go to MIT Media Lab, if you think about like where early innovation that became household names started, Google wasn't household, Microsoft wasn't household, Sun Microsystems wasn't household. They became household after their growth and after they have really built a stack of credibility. And so I kind of look at the DEIS work. If you look at the DEIS, look at it as a field of practice, which is why we are partnering with an academic, a proven academic research institution, is because that level of credibility gives credibility to the framework of the work. And so when I started off 20 years ago in the startup world, it wasn't popular to tell your parents that you're not going to go,
Get the big job.
exactly, and that you got an idea. My mom had an idea too, right? What do you mean you have an idea? I didn't raise you to have ideas. I raised you to go get a good job, right? And that's just a part of how the American dream was structured. And for folks who grasping for the American dream, we more so assimilated toward more. And so the startup community stays really stealth until a company goes really big. When a company is acquired, everybody wants to know who works there, who got rich. When a company goes public, everyone wants to know where I can go buy the stock, right? But when it's the young lady, the young guy, or the mature person working on a laptop, writing code, getting told no over and over again, nobody wants, you can't go to the family cookout and talk about you work at, some unknown startup. And so in hindsight, I realized that from my company building days, that if I wanted to get credibility, I needed to work to align myself with institutions that other institutions would respect. And so for me, those institutions were the Federal Reserve Board or the system. It was the Brookings Institution. It was Morehouse College. And so we partnered with the federal, I used to serve on the committee board for the Federal Reserve Bank. And so we started talking about the concept of solving for the racial wealth gap in our country by creating racial equity in the startup ecosystem. No one had really studied that, particularly on behalf of minorities, particularly on behalf of Black people and communities of color. No one had really studied how can someone become a tech worker, a high growth tech worker, a startup founder, an investor, or get on someone's cap table, and there's an accelerated path for them closing their respective wealth gap, the racial wealth gap, right? All right. So we were intentional about partnering with the feds, right? And we were intentional. I remember a quick story. My wife was watching. Brookings had reached out a couple times, hey, we'd like you to come speak. I get these invitations all the time. I saw Brookings. I knew what Brookings was, but it wasn't a priority. And my wife told me, yeah, Brookings wants me to come speak. She's like, what are you talking about? Brookings wants you to go speak. Of course you're going to go do it, right? And so my point of all of that is, we did research, we worked with the Feds in Kansas, Federal Reserve, I have to be careful saying the Feds like that, but the Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City. And I worked with Dr. Del Gaines, and we basically created a new economic development framework for building inclusive entrepreneurship ecosystems in communities of color to narrow the racial wealth gap. And from what I understand, the terminology that we were using, the startup terminologies and the racial wealth gap terminologies had never been in the same research or documented together, and just weren't really, really talked about. And so what grew out of that is this whole concept of what we call equity districts, which marries itself with the whole concept of innovation districts. And if you really think about operationalizing diversity, equity, inclusion in society or in a city, you have to think about how that place is being redeveloped and rebuilt so that it is equitably inclusive of all people. And so by working with the Federal Reserve Bank in Kansas City and Brookings, that led to the work with the Civic Council. And what might not have been automatically clear is the Civic Council is the aggregate of that region's top 80 CEOs. So when you think about the CEO of Hallmark, the CEO of Cerner, the CEO of Sprint, the CEO of J.E.W., Black and Beach, right? These are some major multinational companies. And so the Civic Council is the aggregate of those respective organizations. So Shayla, you want to talk a little bit about, and this is really a DEIS initiative in Greater Kansas City, but the shared prosperity, kind of the macro initiative related to your work there in Kansas City.
Sorry, I was having a little bit of hard time hearing in and out. So one more time, which specifically do you want to talk about?
Just the overarching shared prosperity goals of the Civic Council.
Yeah, got it.
And how do you think about that in terms of DEIS?
Yep, absolutely. So like Rodney mentioned, we are a nonprofit with all the biggest CEOs in the region. And so that puts us in this unique position to be able to kind of set the tone for any changes in movement that we, want to see, especially in this case in diversity, equity, inclusion. So last year we had a strategic board meeting and we said, what we call inclusive prosperity is our top priority. So we've been kind of going around, kind of finding what role the business community can play in doing some of those initiatives. So we've really been looking at kind of, wealth building, getting assets for people of color, that ecosystem that Rodney's talking about, building that up and supporting that from the ground up to help entrepreneurs of color get their programming, help them get in the door of these networks. Those are two of our really big initiatives that we're looking at overarching. A few other ones that we're really trying to look at how we make decisions across the board in economic development more inclusive, looking at tools where we can give, organizations or cities all this information that says, well, you use these suppliers right now. How could you look at this and make a more diverse choice? So looking at how we build these options to kind of transform our whole region to be more diverse and be more intentional about these decisions. Another really big initiative we have going on is supply chain diversity. We are having a CEO to CEO challenge, starting with our members, asking them to make intentional purchasing decisions. So hiring companies that have, are diverse background and have 100 employees or less. So we're really just trying to start from, the ground up to transform the whole region to be thinking about diversity and inclusion in every single step of business decisions.
That's awesome. Thank you for that, Shayla. One of the things that I want to piggyback on is what you were talking about, supply chains, because I think that leads well into thinking through the framework of what DEIS is about, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion built into the fabric of your organization. It's not just recruiting, it's every single piece. And I know that when I've had conversations with both of you, and I can tell you're on the same page as well, Shayla, is that that's when you see the true impact. And I know that, you know, these two here have talked about the DEIS index and things like that. Can y'all talk a little bit about what that means to y'all as far as how it gets integrated, and what would the impact be to those organizations if they were truly integrated DEIS from the inside?
Sure. Well, if you're watching it, you're also thinking about signing up for the certificate this fall. I want you to think about this. Inside of your organization, how do you actually move the needle? And what does moving the needle mean? And what does moving the needle mean for the fiduciaries of your organization? Where they're thinking about economic output, they're thinking about their market share, they're thinking about the value of their company, the stock price. And when we really started codifying the DEIS framework, we wanted to speak to the fiduciaries of organizations, the folks who stay up at night thinking about the ticker price or thinking about the valuation of the organization, right? Thinking about what does headcount look like? You know, how many people am I looking to hire in the next 12 to 18 months? And how am I going to get there? What does procurement look like? You know, how can I increase it? How can I reduce it? What does our investment look like? And so we have 7 functional areas that we added, because today, going back even 50 years, when you think about the diversity movement, most of it has been focused on change management and leadership and around human resources. And then it skips over to impact. What does the philanthropy or the corporate social responsibility look like? And everything else is just business. And you know, diversity, equity, has nothing to do with everything else. But it actually does. And so the framework is governance and board, which really sets the precedent on the culture of the organization, how the organization will respect equity, respect people, respect the intersectionality across. Because it has to be enforced. It's just like the Department of Justice. We can pass laws, but we don't have a Department of Justice to enforce all the laws as best as they can, then there won't be compliance to said law. So that governance is important. And then the talent is important as well. And it's not just about getting entry-level talent, but what does talent look in the C-suite? VP, management, product teams, you know, and then what does pay transparency look like? You know, folks get pretty mad when they figure out they've been doing the same work as their counterparts and making like 68 cents on the dollar, right? You can get real mad and, you know, walk off the job really quickly. But what if there was like systems for pay transparency and for equity? Traditionally, women and minorities, we're grateful to be at the table, so we don't negotiate. We don't push back. If you say this is an offer, you know, until you learn that like the first person who talks money loses, right? They teach you that in the art of the deal. But if someone makes you an offer and you're like, all right, that's it, but you're not pushing back, you may not be getting, you know, but what if it was just transparent? And say, this is what it is for everybody in this role, and this is what you're gonna get. This is what the equity is, no admin, you know. And so those are the types of solutions we'll be talking about. Then there's procurement. Some companies spend billions of dollars on procurement to run their business effectively. And there's been a system inside of America for about 50 years called supply diversity, started by Harry Michelle, the National Minority Supply Development Council, where procurement also helps to drive business growth as well. Then there's product design, as we think about automation and how artificial intelligence, machine learning, quantum computing can be helpful and or harmful. There's a student, a learner, a professional that signed up for DEIS this fall who used to work at Fitbit. And she gave an example, and I asked her, could I tell this example or not? She said, sure. Fitbit was releasing a new product, but the product was not built to recognize brown skin or black skin. And so it didn't work. And if there had been a person of color on that product team, you know, they would have been coding and building software and hardware saying, hey guys, I'm telling you, look, I just tested it in the lab, it didn't work. Well, let's go back and hack a little bit more. Does it work now, right? Oh yeah, it worked. Oh, well, does it work on gradients, right? And if you don't have anyone on your product team thinking about that, how many billions of customers do you lose on a product, right? To me, shareholders should care about that. And so those are the nuances of DEIS that are just not being talked about in society. And then there's go-to-market. There are customers that you may have that you're not targeting your marketing. I mean, there's a reason that certain products are targeted towards women. And there's a reason certain products are targeted towards millennials. And so we'll be teaching go-to-market on how to target so you can increase your market share by being culturally competent and relevant to your respective audience. And then for companies that have balance sheets, there's the investment part of it, where now we're seeing companies invest on and off balance sheet into venture funds, into founders, into entrepreneurship support programs. And that's the way to move the needle that can be measured and can be funded. Remember, if you have a DEIS initiative that feels good but has no funding, it's performing. And it feels good, like, God, we had such a great meeting. God, cool by you. Nobody's life has changed, right? And then impact, corporate social responsibility and impact. And the reason I'm excited to be working on DEIS with David, you know, this launching pad of the certificate is key because it codifies the framework. But David has been helping to elevate our thinking on what it would look like to have like a DEIS index, with a DEIS scorecard and the research. And I'll let David talk a little bit more about that.
So, and it's no secret for a guy that passed legislation on crowdfunding and things related to that I'm a big believer in capital flows. And you know, you do a much bigger job of transforming the world if you can provide people with an incentive, and particularly fiduciaries who are sitting on boards of directors. So we'd like to start to see create indices that measure diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're I think pretty sober about it. We understand that what's important is to move the needle, right? So we like to measure in these indices progress, right? And to give people something which is reasonable to achieve and to have people commit. You know, I call them, these are pledges, right? And in private companies too, you know, you need to not just talk the talk and be and ultimately be performative. You need to be, these Rodney's language, I mean, we've got to walk the talk. And so indices, you know, will also give an added incentive because the way markets work is people start to run money around indices, right? And those that lag and are on are laggards are going to be penalized. You know, there's a big movement in this country now. A couple of things. I've a shout out to Dina Friedman, who's the CEO of NASDAQ, an old partner of mine. I don't know if you caught it, but the SEC just approved NASDAQ's requirement for boards of directors to be more diverse. Okay, so you know, there's a real movement afoot. Also, you know, we talk about investing money along ESG. What is ESG? It is environment, right? It's social, and it is governance, right? Well, those are two things there that fit, right? Social and governance that fit square in the wheelhouse of what Rodney and OHUB and this collective are doing. So we have beginnings of tools, and we're working through the nuance, you know, going into Atlanta, where Rodney's from. You know, if I was to have, you know, the same percentage employees that were African American as in South Dakota, that would not be acceptable, right? Because of the differences in population. I think the African American population in Atlanta is about 30%. So, you know, we've got to be doing things that are fair, realistic, but also stretch goals that are achievable for people to do a better job at the same time that we translate to them why, you know, they're going to be rewarded for doing the things that we need. And I know Vicki, that comment, which is very important, which is diverse businesses outperform non-diverse, is absolutely critical to the foundation of some of this thinking. But there's also a bigger, I think, a bigger message here, which is that collectively, that by doing better, this country will do better, and we're going to leave this place in a much better position for the next generation. We have to kind of get our act together and get all of our human capital maximally performing. And I don't want to get off on my soapbox too much, but one of the things that we've meant, but I'm going to do it for a second, the country is the world's leader in incarceration. Okay, we incarcerate more people, and it's disproportionately affecting the African American community. And what's shameful about that is we've now taken human capital that should be an asset to society, and we've turned it into a liability. That is doing nothing but shooting ourselves in the foot. So if I can preach a little bit, it's up to everybody, every single one of us, to go out and take the message and start working on these things to get 100% of our people doing the best that they can possibly do in society. We also have to do our work to transform flows of capital. When I was having this conversation with one of our OHUB partners who you saw earlier, Kyron Blanks, you could be Black Einstein in an inner city poor neighborhood today, and you're not going to get funded. And the reason for that is that most businesses get started with friends and family money. And if your friends and family are poor, it's more likely that you're going to get struck by a bolt of lightning than you're going to get a business started. So how we change those flows of capital is absolutely essential to driving long-term innovation and economic growth, upward mobility, U.S. competitiveness, and ultimately national security. All of these things are interrelated. So it's not just about, why is it good for the African American community. The beauty of it is that by doing right by the African American community and women, we're going to do right by the country and by our long-term outlook. So that's the message that I'd like to leave. It's in everybody's best interest to do a better job here.
Thanks for that, y'all.
Here.
Soapbox is encouraged on panels with Rodney, so it's good. So I did want to open it up. We have a few minutes for questions. I don't know if there's anyone who has questions here in the audience or online, but if online, drop them in the chat. Otherwise, anyone here, let me know if anyone here has any questions. Yes.
Yeah, question for David. So Rex has done a lot to sort of move equity down from the sort of accredited investors and move it down. What other things do you think need to happen in order to help make that more diverse?
Can't repeat the question.
Yeah, the question is RegCF has made capital generally more available. That's RegCF stands for crowdfunding, and they've taken the limit from what was originally $1 million up to $5 million. So you can actually raise money from the public for entrepreneurial growth startups, and which is actually revolutionary because historically it was only accredited investors, right, which are people with $250,000 a year in income for the last 2 years, or a fairly high net worth. So it's sort of democratizing access to capital in many respects. I think the challenge, though, is, again, that if you look at the way crowdfunding sites work, okay, most of the time these startups are getting done with friends and family money initially, and then maybe you're rounding out when you got some momentum with a third of the people that are in the crowdfunding site. So if there's 160,000 investors in a crowdfunding site, about a third of the capital, they'll top it off, is really what you see. And I talk to all these guys, right? And so if you can't jumpstart it because you don't have the friends and family, it's not going to work. So what can we do to change that? Great question. And what I'd love to see, which is going to be tough as nails to do, is I'd love to see a tax credit to invest in companies that are incubated in areas that are targeted economic development zones. Most of the economic opportunity zone stuff has been done for, sort of real estate construction kinds of oriented projects, okay? blue collar jobs. I don't want to belittle that. It's absolutely wonderful, but we want startup because real wealth is going to be created by innovation and entrepreneurial growth startups. And so I'd love to see, where, you get a 50-cent tax credit or $1. So to be completely crass about it, okay, you get an incentive for a rich, white district to invest in a poor black district. Wonderful, okay? And then you bring in incubators, like one of my friends is Bruce Lincoln, runs Silicon Harlem, okay? Princeton graduate, African American. I mean, we can set it. We've got incubators that are run by African Americans in various places, but you want to give an incentive for people to look at those incubating companies to finance them. And I think by doing that, we kind of also change inner city culture, that the rock stars, the athletes, if you will, of those inner cities will start to become, technology entrepreneurs, which I think would absolutely be sheer genius. So we got to get back to, we're going to start something, by the way. And, I haven't tapped Rodney, but he's going to get tapped in to know this yet, called the JUMP Coalition, which is JUWMP, stands for Jobs, Upward Mobility, Making Markets Perform. And the one other thing that I want to mention is that we still haven't fixed the IPO market. And we got this flyover state problem in the United States because what we did was we dropped the bottom out of the IPO market. We got very close to a new stock market structure, venture exchange, which we worked on, that was in a bill called the Jobs and Investor Confidence Act of 2018. But when the then president shut down the government over the wall, it mooted the legislation. That legislation, which needs to be resurrected by Maxine Waters, it passed the House 406-4. It was ludicrously bipartisan. You can't even get a proclamation in favor of motherhood and apple pie from the House, 406-4. And it was supposed to get tacked on to the Senate Appropriations Bill and passed into law, and it was even supported by the Trump administration, and then it got pushed into the next Congress, which moves legislation. So there's an appetite for this stuff. And so we want to create a construct to go and start lobbying for it, because we need to hit this problem at every level. We need to go in and go into the companies through DEIS certification program. We've got to start drinking the Kool-Aid, walking the talk, and we've got to start creating governmental policies that are going to do a better job of financing entrepreneurship in areas that really desperately need it, with people that desperately need it. And if we do those things, we're going to be a whole hell of a lot better off when we look back in another 20, 30 years. Sorry to serve it.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the investors here? Because I think that just preview for Thursday.
What's interesting about the framework of DEIS is that it transcends industry over into policy, into the capital markets. And if you've been listening and tracking, you'll see how it's sort of like, a macro framework, but also grassroots implementation. And I've also been encouraged by recent legislation that the American Innovation and Competition Act, it was Schumer co-sponsored it, Mark Warner, Ro Khanna, heavily Democratic legislation, but got the support of bipartisanship in the House and passed the Senate. It passed the Senate about a month and a half ago, $250 billion for American innovation and competition. A small carve-out for $10 billion is now in the House, called the Endless Frontier Act, to establish 18 new regional tech hubs outside of the coastal hub. So not in California, New York, Massachusetts, flyover states. 6 will be in rural communities. 6 will be in kind of mainstream, larger communities. And then 6 will be emerging, they call innovation districts, right? This region is actually perfect for forming a coalition. And for the first time, Dodd-Frank, we were able to include, the legislation that created a chief office of a chief diversity officer. And I think that had some impact. But in this last Endless Frontier Act, I actually had the opportunity to help redline and,
Help write it.
Help write the House version of this Endless Frontier Act. And as much as possible in terms of federal legalese, we were able to get DEIS into the framework, right? We're gonna have to watch it to see what stays in it versus what, but I'm very optimistic. I mean, one of the things that one of these innovation regional tech hubs will be in an area that has a density of minority serving institutions. Well, that North Carolina counts because of the number of HBCUs you have in the Raleigh-Durham area in particular. Atlanta's another density of HBCUs. New Orleans is one as well. Of course, DC with Howard and UDC. There are only about 4 or 5 cities or regions that would even qualify. But by writing that in, it guarantees that there'll be resources that get to communities that wouldn't normally get those type of resources. So when you think about the DEIS, framework, in terms of whether this certificate is for you, if you really wanted to adapt the mindset of thinking through complex problems and complex organizations and coming up with like very, very practical solutions, that's really what we'll be teaching. You'll be hearing from people like David and other subject matter experts across, the 7-point framework, faculty from Stanford, Duke, UNC. I mean, we're going to do a lot of pontificating stuff, but when you leave that program, you should be thinking differently about how I can apply this in my life, but also how can I apply this inside of my respective organization. And between this and the certificate, what we'll be talking about on Thursday, the investment certificate as well, also talks about how capital formation in the Black community is important as well. And I think that we may have some questions or some remarks as we wrap up.
Yes, so we actually have one question online from Warren Jones. And to Shayla, you may be the best person to address this. He's asking if the DEIS program will be helpful to nonprofit leaders. They are looking to advance their DEI and ARAO ideas and values to action that touches all levels of their mission and service delivery. Could you speak to that? And then we're going to have to wrap up. I'm going to pass it after we're done over to Kyron and Jill for wrap up. But if you could help us address this question to Shayla, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, we are a nonprofit, and this is something we're pushing. We find very valuable. It offers that shared understanding, that shared foundation, where we think that we can embed that through, nonprofits, for-profits, academics. So I would say that yes, absolutely valuable. And I'm sure, Rodney can add to that, but my short answer is yes, absolutely. I think that, it would be number one on our list of what we're advocating to our members to do. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Well, I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. Thank you also to our audience here in person and also our audience virtually. It's been a great conversation. As always, I always learn a lot, and I'm really excited to see those in the audience move towards action. And I'm going to actually turn it back over to Jill and Kyron. If we can find them here, I'm going to actually have David and Rodney for their final comments. Okay, we're going to turn it back over to y'all. Bye, everybody.
Wow, what an incredible conversation about a very unique program, that we're bringing to market. I mean, David Will, Rodney Sampson, Vicki Gibbs. What a compelling group to have on to just discuss the program, its impact, and give a little bit of historic context of just like the richness and the real value that people can get from it. Jill, what would you say that the audience really needs to take away from this conversation?
This was such a compelling conversation, guys. I want to take just a minute and say thanks for everyone for tuning in. I want to tell you a little bit more about our actual DEI Solutions certificate program, because I know many of you guys came here because you're really interested in the program and you want to hear a little bit more about it. So I know that a lot of you might be kind of looking at ways that you can deepen your learning around DEI. So here are 2 quick ways how this program is really different than a lot of the other ones that you might have looked into. The first is that this is really DEI at an organizational level. Most of the probably DEI trainings or courses that you might have looked into in the past, they really tend to either focus on the individual, kind of like an implicit bias or racial equity training program, or DEI, as we know, tends to live within HR a lot. So it has to do a lot with diversity in your talent pipeline, and we know that DEI goes well beyond HR. So this course really covers these 7 kind of primary functional areas of a company and how to really incorporate and integrate DEI very meaningfully. So this is a total kind of overhaul of your DEI strategy for your organization. And the second thing is that this is so action oriented. I know, like, I've been reading the chat comments that folks are ready to get going, walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And so this is a very action oriented program. Rodney has spent a lot of time creating an incredible framework, kind of like, think about Lean Canvas, like a whole blueprint and framework for you to implement DEI in all the facets of your organization. So the course is structured, it's over 6 months. The course is structured, each session, half of it is really content and incredible speakers like the folks we had today. You should see the speaker lineup that OHUB has put together. It's incredible. But half each session is kind of content, and the other half is totally focused on implementation. So it's talking about your specific situation, whether you are a for-profit company or government or nonprofit or university or whatever your unique situation is. We're going to help you in that last half of each session translate that so that it's really designed to be implemented immediately.
I couldn't have said it better. And I think they're just more up on we want to say DEIS.
DEIS.
Yeah, DEI is behind
us.
DEIS. DEIS is what we're here to put into practice, what we're here to build into organizations. I really just want to add on to what you said. I really couldn't have said it better. You know, this 6-month program is really led by top scholars, practitioners, leaders from business and technology and in the civic and government spaces, you know, to come and show us again how to not only take this from understand the theory, but put this into real practice, real transformational practice, so that the world as we know it is going forward will be more diverse, inclusive, and like you said, action and solutions driven. So it's really, think about this as it's designed to empower our participants to modernize leadership practices and really make, again, diversity, DEIS, I'm gonna say it again, DEIS, solutions a business priority. So this needs to be core when you are sitting down with your financial team, HR, you said those other high impact, influential, functional areas of your organization. This needs to be the center of the conversation. If you are sitting through thinking about how you're going to allocate marketing dollars, and there is not a significant portion that is pointed toward making sure that a racially equitable initiatives and options are on the table so that everyone everywhere can fully benefit, then my friend, I have to say that your business could be pointed toward the downstream of failure right now. And so I really, again, my heart, I think the heart of UNC says that the DEIS work is important. It is paramount to success. And to Jill's point earlier, you know, again, we're really standing out because our DEIS graduates will leave this program not just with a certificate and a piece of paper, but with an action plan to go into their organization, to go into their communities, or any space where they have influence and impact, and really make what I want to call transformational impact with DEIS at the center. And so I can say this 10,000 more times. Say it with me if you're in your living rooms or wherever you're checking in from. DEIS. DEIS. Not DEI, but DEIS. That is what we're here to do, share light on this work. And so without further ado, this has just been such a brilliant experience. And Jill, thank you for just joining and for helping to put this all together. I want to thank our panelists, David Will, who came in all the way from New York, Rodney for always sharing his rich perspective, 20 years of experience, you know, building inclusive technology ecosystem and how it's continuing to carry that torch and pass it along to persons like myself who are next in line and other leaders like yourself who will be enrolling in this DEIS program to learn this work and understand how to really have sincere influence. Vicki Gibbs, thank you so much again, and the entire UNC Keenan Flagler eShip team for helping us to bring this to life. To Shayla, thank you so much for joining us virtually and sharing your expertise and knowledge. And, to, of course, our other partners, Stanford and Duke, for also helping us to bring this work, spread this message of equity to the broader world. So, Jill, any closing thoughts?
No, just that we hope to talk to many of you all soon. We know that a lot of folks on that are tuning in tonight are as excited as we are about this work. And so we're here to support you. We're here to answer any questions that you have. We're going to send out a note after this for everyone who is kind of registered for this event. We're going to send a note out and we'll give you some additional information. But we would love to talk to you. You can book a 15-minute call with us. Check out our website, which we will, if we haven't posted it a bunch in the chat, you can probably scroll up in the comments and see it there.
Absolutely. And just want to thank you all again. And without further ado, we're going to hand it over to the DJ to wrap the night up. So thank you so much for everyone for joining in. Absolutely. And just want to thank you.
Live, pick this up. People online are trying to say they can't hear you.
Yeah, it's probably not gonna sound good without being patched in.
Yeah. Can you correct that for Thursday?
Yeah, I can. We just need another device to stream through, not the computer.
Yeah.
I got an extra device.
I'm good. Sure.
Yeah.